All right, well, let's start the program. Trond Forre over here, if you recall, he took us on a tour of glass blowing at Iowa State, which he still does. Someday he hopes to retire, maybe what, 20 years, Trond?
Hopefully 3.
So anyway, Trond will give us a talk on largemouth bass fishing. I want you to all take notes. So, no, seriously, Trond will make a presentation now, so go ahead.
All right. Morning. Said my name's Trond. That's the reason for the Norwegian flag in the fjord. My dad was born in Norway. He immigrated over here in 1957 and just kind of made his home in Slater, Iowa, and just kind of been there since. So, but I've actually we've still got relatives over there, so we got to go out in the fjord and fish, and which was pretty cool. Codfish, which is typical, I guess.
What depth are they, Trond?
Oh God. I mean, you get a ball, a lead ball, and you know, these fjords are
1,000 feet deep.
yeah, we were 150 foot deep, but you know, it was so primitive. We'd have a spool of monofilament line that was like 100-pound test with red plastic worms about every 20 feet. And you just drop it straight down over the boat. You just sit there all day. And
that brings new meaning to drop shotting.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much how they fished. They caught fish. So yeah, I live in Slater, been there pretty much my whole life. Got 5 kids between my wife and I. I've got 3 boys. She's got a boy and a girl. We got 3 grandsons. Pretty much fished my whole life. My dad grew up on the fjord over there, so he fished every day, he said. So ever since I was a little kid, we've been out Big Creek. And we go up trout fishing quite a bit. So yeah, it's just I've been around fishing my whole life, which is a good thing. Kind of got into bass tournaments, which was a lot of gone time. When my boys, or when the kids got older, ended up selling my bass boat, and with all the kids stuff in school, kind of got out of the fishing till they grew up more, and just kind of got back into it. We got into race cars and went drag racing for quite a few years, and that was just too much money. But now it's back to fishing. So
Yeah, that's cheap.
it's a hell of a lot cheaper than racing. I guarantee you. Depending, yeah.
Okay, does it work?
What do I have to point that at?
Oh, here.
Turned on.
It's on. Well, what's the matter? Well, you just
Worked a
look at
minute
me.
ago.
It worked a minute ago. I don't understand it. Okay, Trond, you just look at me and.
Yeah, go ahead.
understand it. Yeah. I can't move it. There.
Yeah, that's what I do for a living. I've been at Iowa State since 1988. Been glass blowing pretty much all those years. So hopefully get to retire one of these days and enjoy what you guys do. So.
Now try it one more time.
Okay.
Let's see.
There we go.
There it goes.
Okay. That's my boat. Yeah, got that 4 years ago. Found it used over by Cedar Fall or Council Bluffs, and just love the boat. was a low hour boat. It's a great boat. I've had it on some, we were at Big Spirit and we were on like 4-foot rollers and it was scary, but it held. But the diesel, not so much. Right now, the gas prices we just got back from Texas and I paid $5.19 down there. It was like terrible. I like to fish for pretty much anything. We go up trout fishing at least 2-3 times a year. Take my boys and I take my dad. My dad's 82, so he's slowing down a little bit, and we try to get him up there at least once a year. We've been doing that ever since the early 80s, going up trout fishing. So mainly up by Highlandville, north of Decorah.
Where does he live?
In Slater.
Oh, well, he should come to these meetings then. 82 fits right in.
Right? I never thought about that, yeah. Once in a while bass fishing, I catch a decent walleye. That was caught on a Nico rig, bass fishing at 12 Mile. That was a nice walleye. Tasted good enough. It went back. Big Creek.
Do you have power poles in the back of yours?
I don't. So that's a buddy of mine's bass boat.
Okay,
So I was fishing with him that day, and
I was gonna ask about the work.
yeah. I put a Ulterra, is it Ulterra trolling motor?
Yeah.
Personally, you don't need power poles. We went to Texas and that buddy of mine, that's his boat. He pulled his down. He only used his power poles down there twice. You know, pretty much. I mean, he's got the active target, you know, and he's always like, well, the bass gets spooked with your trolling motor. Schooling bass, I think they do. But I sat there and watched him on his active target on his trolling motor with a bass 10 feet out, and he flipped the drop shot right to it, watched it come up and eat it with the trolling motor on. So the power poles
And you got spot.
occasionally, but yeah, you got spot lock. And them things are expensive. So I'd rather, yeah. And a lot of weight. Yeah, the back of this boat, when we slow down, the water just. Crappie fishing, that's, other than bass fishing, that's probably my favorite. Just lots of crap. Couple nice ones down at Red Hawk. That lake is amazing for how small it is, the quality of fish in that lake.
It did get messed up with a tornado. I don't
Bad.
know. Yeah,
Bad. I don't think it's open yet.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
trees all over the place probably.
right.
I heard it might be September, Trond.
Was that right?
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's what I heard here.
Yeah. Well, that means a 7.5 pounder will grow up to 8 or 9.
Right. Right. A few of the lakes that I really like to fish, Red Hawk, of course, is like my favorite. It's just, you can just always go down there and catch fish. You know, last year we went down with jerk baits and a fluke, and you caught 100 fish in one day. It's just crazy. Granted, they weren't all big, but you just caught fish. 12 Mile, that's a heck of a good lake. That walleye I caught last year down at 12 Mile, that day we caught 23 keeper bass over 15 inches that day. It was a good day. Brushy Creek, that's super good fish creek. I mean, just it gets hit pretty hard though anymore. They've got Wednesday night tournaments on that lake every Wednesday from spring until fall. It gets hit pretty hard. they got the fish in there. I mean, the walleye are phenomenal. The bass are phenomenal. The muskies are phenomenal. It's just a great lake. Little River, another just a great lake to fish. Green Valley, I think that's got a 18 or 19-inch minimum. That's,
18.
yeah,
So,
that's a real nice lake to fish.
right north of Creston State Park.
Yeah, and then 3 Mile, it's kind of like 12 Mile, Little River. The cabins at 3 Mile, I don't know if you guys have seen those. They're excellent to stay. We used to have a bunch of guys at Iowa State. We'd get together every spring and go down to 3 Mile and rent the cabins out. And great facilities, shower facilities, decent price for the cabin rental. And they got a place you back your boat right up next to the cabin. You can plug them in. It's just a nice added deal.
I
Yeah.
found in Green Valley, it really gets really green mossy along around the edges. Are you gonna talk about how you approach that kind of crap?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah, outside of Iowa, I could say my favorite Sam Rayburn, except I just got back from there last Saturday. Awesome lake to fish. Bull Shoals, I fished that. It's a great fishery. It's just any species of fish you want, you can catch in there, it seems like. The other one's that OH Ivy, that third one is now the big talk in bass fishing. It's a huge reservoir in Texas that it's producing 13 to 15 pound bass right. I mean,
Where is that
giants.
located? Waco or?
It's kind of in the central, maybe a little bit western.
Out of Waco.
One of my sons was in San Angelo, and it's east of there a little bit. So, yeah, it's just a huge clear water reservoir that's got giants. Catching these in the A rigs or the Alabama rigs, with the 5 different hooks that you pull, umbrella rig or whatever you want. Toledo Bend, that's a good one. Kentucky Lake. I've actually fished Kentucky Lake years ago in a tournament, and that's a pretty cool lake. It's just, those are so huge, it's kind of overwhelming. You know, if you don't sit and fish it for at least a week, you just pretty much don't know where to go.
Toledo Bend is 185 miles long, so you have plenty area to fish.
Yeah.
In Kentucky Lake, a lot of crappie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, rods. I've got a different variety of rods that I like. A couple of them, we just got into the 13 fishing. They're now producing some pretty good rods and reels. This is a 13. It's a 7-9. It's good flipping and pitching rod. Throwing a jig or a creature bait. This is an Abu Garcia bass fisherman. We call it a fluffy rod. So that's what we float. You know, we throw our wacky worm, Nico. This is a drop shot. I'll show you in a minute. Just a different variety of rods that we have. We have probably close to 20 we keep in the boat. So, I mean, there's probably, yeah, it's crazy.
Do you want to tell them the difference between flipping and pitching?
Yeah. So to flip a jig or to pitch a jig, you actually take the jig in your hand and you pitch it to a tree or whatever. You know, you try to pitch it up there softly. the flipping, it's similar, but to flip it, you don't grab the bait. You flip it, you just use your line here to flip it back in. So you really never reel it, you just flipping it into the cover. Whereas pitching, you just grab it and you just, pitch it in and then reel up. So that's kind of the difference in the flipping and pitching.
Do you load the rod up when you're pitching it or not?
No, I mean, usually you loosen your spool and you just, flip it right out. Just kind of nice and easy.
Have you used that technique on crappie, Trond, with like going under docks?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Actually, I love when crappie fishing with an ultralight. I'll just sit there like that with the crappie jig and just flip it up under docks or trees or, yeah. That's definitely a
So those look the same. What's the difference between those two?
the what?
Pitching and flipping look pretty much the same to me.
Okay, so pitching, you grab the jig and you,
That's when you want to throw it a little bit farther.
yeah, and you'll just pitch it out. But when you want to flip it like next to a dock, you just grab this line right here. And you'll just like lay it right up in there. So you're not going as far. It's more of a subtle, close to your boat flip.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, okay.
And you're probably, would you agree, Trond, you can be in the water a lot more than fooling around, casting, reeling in. You're constantly,
Oh, yeah.
you're probably in the water 40% more. by
Oh, at
using
least,
that.
yeah. Yeah, your lure in the water is a lot longer. Yeah. Versus reeling up,
'Cause you're bringing
casting.
it back, this right back in.
Yeah,
back and
right,
forth.
right. Reels, I've got, Lou's reels are real good. I like the Quantums. That's got a few Abu Garcias. My favorite right now is the Lou's. They're a really smooth casting reel. Got real good bearing system and the magnet system, the magnet on it's real nice. So for me, the seasonal bass movement, so the spring, like when we went to Texas, we knew they were, the water temp was 53, 54 degrees when we got down there. We knew they were transitioning up, the big ones were transitioning up to spawn. So we would really hit the creek channels. We would hit the main points. We knew we actually found them with our side scan. We'd go across points, and on the side scan, you could see them out in front of the points. You could just see the fish. So we just turn around and fish it and catch them. And the creek channels, we had probably our best luck on creek channels down there. We'd get on our map and we'd look at a creek channel going back into one of these giant cuts and start out on a creek channel, not back in these coves, but out further, because we knew being the colder water, they were still going to be fairly deep, 8 to 12 foot. And we pulled up on one creek channel and we sat there and caught 13 fish without moving. And they were all decent fish.
Were they spawning or?
Nope, these fish were like white. So that you could tell they just moved in from the deep.
Okay.
They were really pale. And then we actually went from that creek channel, went out to a secondary point and caught some fish, and they were more green, so that you could tell they'd been there. They had greened up and got real colorful. That's the biggest way we can tell, bass fishing is you catch an early bass, like now, they're going to be real pale because they've been deep. get them up by the bank and they're just bright green and colorful. It's a big difference. Summer and fall, I think, are kind of similar. We fish, you know, the creek channels again. Brush piles are great. The trees, the weed lines. So like back to your question at Green Valley, the weed lines, typically we'll try to, you know, either flip them right at the weed line edge, or parallel it with a crankbait, spinnerbait, stuff like that. Weed lines can be really, really good. We found, so down in Texas, the weeds, we found that, so that's primarily hydrilla down there. And wherever that hydrilla was, it was bass. They just absolutely were just in it. And we ended up fishing. We fished some drop shot mainly, and kind of what we ended up catching most of our fish on. We caught some others. I can't see. So this was probably by far our best lure in the spring down there. We just had in the hydrilla, it was sticking up, so your drop shot would be up out of the weeds versus throwing a wacky worm or a Nico that would actually go down in the weeds. The fish wouldn't see it that good. So the only bad thing about this is this weight is just terrible. Anyway, we
I've heard that if you use that drop shot weight and kind of bounce it off the bottom, kind of stirs up the puff stuff on the bottom, that kind of attracts the fish.
It could, yeah, definitely. That was probably our best. So the weight is on the bottom. You go up anywhere from 10 to 12 inches on your leader. You tie in your drop shot hook, and then you can either use a little worm or whatever little shad bait you want. It's kind of a drop shot bait. They're usually
You
a
keep talking,
finesse.
I'll get it unwound for you.
Thank you.
Are you particular on the drop shot rig with the hook facing up?
Yes.
Or down, or is it
Up.
That's
Yep.
good.
Yep, my son tied his on and it was facing down. And I didn't say anything because I figured he's a big boy.
Do you use just regular hooks or do you use the drop shot hook that has the two little holes on each side? You know what I'm saying? You can buy the actual.
Oh, I know what you're, no, we just use a drop shot hook. It's kind of a wider gap, and then the eyelet is actually kicked back. So it will actually, when you tie it, it'll kick that hook out when you're lying. I'll kind of show you if it ever comes out, but
You buy
Yep.
them somewhere or special or?
no, you can buy them anywhere. I'll bet you Jack's has probably got them.
I think you better retie.
Yeah. But yeah, my son tied his upside down and I caught 5 fish to his 1. Finally, I said, you might want to turn your hook around.
What line type is on there? What's?
So that I use a 10-pound braid,
Okay.
sunline braid with a 10-pound sunline fluorocarbon leader.
Okay.
I primarily, this This I use a 20-pound Sunline fluorocarbon. Just a really, really,
That's coming up on the slide.
yeah, here, I'll, there we go. So yeah, primarily flipping, pitching, use the 20-pound, crankbait and the jerk baits. I'll go down to a 10 to 12 pound. It seems to get that crankbait or jerk bait down deeper. Plus the fluorocarbon actually sinks. So that's kind of a little added if you want to get that bait deeper. Top water, I always go 100% braid. It floats. I know the 20-pound Sunline on a Zara spook, it literally, the line pulls the lure under. It just doesn't go good. So the braid on top water is, to me, is by far the best. Did he get it? We got it. Thank you.
Holy mackerel.
Holy,
It was a mess.
that was a mess.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah. So here's the drop shot. It's pretty simple, but it's really, really effective. I mean, the finicky fish seem to they just come up and they can't resist it. They just eat it. Depending on, we pour our own baits and we pour these little leeches. And that buddy of mine, Tim, that went down, he had his best luck on the leeches, on the little 4-inch leech on the drop shot. And primarily Gabe and I, my son, we use these little 5-inch worms and he caught a 6-pound bass on that. Just ate it.
What type of hook are you using there?
It's a drop shot hook.
Okay.
I think it's VMC. So, and that's pretty key on what he asked earlier, that hook always facing up. And it's just you get a better hook set with
What kind
that.
of knot do you use then?
So you do a polymer knot,
Oh,
and then if your hook is not correct, you take your tag line before you put this on and you put it down through the loop again, and that actually brings your hook out. So
How do you work that rig?
you can flip it out. We usually just cast it out, and that weight hits the bottom pretty quick, and you can literally just sit there and shake it, and they'll hit it.
Just like on your screen.
Yeah, exactly. And or we'll bring it in like a wacky worm or a jig or something. You can just bounce it in, and seems to work really well, real well.
Quarter ounce on there, Trond?
Pardon?
Quarter ounce or what?
Yeah, yep. We've got different sizes for, if you're fishing, you can fish. I mean, shoot, we were fishing these in 3 foot of water. In the back of a bay, you can just flip it clear back in there and just let it sit there, and we'll just come up and eat it.
Have you found a certain kind of weight will snag less than others? Or not?
Yep. So we have this little slender one. We also have some round ones. They seem to get snagged up a lot worse. So these pull through rocks, through weeds pretty good. They're just, you can look at it later. You just put your line up in here and it pinches on that. So if it does get snagged, it just pulls out. So you don't lose your whole setup. Then you just put a new one on and away you go.
Are you pouring those?
Yeah. Way cheaper. We lost a lot. Yeah, the spinning, that's a 10-pound Sunline braid. it could cast a mile. I mean, there's no diameter to it at all. The knot I use from the braid to the leader, I use a double uni, but I use it, or each side I at least go 6 to 7 turns and then pull it, and gosh, it doesn't break. I mean, that's what Gabe caught his on this 6-pounder and brought it right in. So it's a good, they've got that Alberto knot or whatever that
FG.
it's yeah. That's just too much time for me. This one works good. Yeah, I think my favorite thing to throw is a jig. It always catches the bigger bass, it seems like. It just does. It's always been a big bass lure. It's just kind of a go-to bait. If it's tough, you just throw it out there and let it sit.
Notice the footnote.
Pardon?
Footnote.
Oh. Wacky worm fishing is for amateurs, especially if they use the red shed laminate. Now, that was not my doing. I'm not gonna release any names, but I think we all know.
We have a professional amateur.
What do you put on your jigs?
That's pretty much exactly what I'll throw right there. Just we make those jigs and then pour that plastic.
That's the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So
is that weedless or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, either put a little tail like that, or a creature bait, or even a craw, small craw for a trailer. Yeah, you guys can pass around that. This is some of the stuff we make. Me and a buddy of mine. We pour the plastics or inject them. Yes.
When you make the weedless, what do you use, monofilament or wire or?
For the weed guard,
Yeah.
you can buy the weed guards. You'll see it in there. And when you pour the jig mold and the jig head, it's got a metal rod that you put in there to have that open cavity. And then you buy the weed guard and you epoxy it in when it's done, after it's painted. Yep, you'll see it. Drop shot again.
Which presentation do you see we get the most walleye? Around Brian.
That Nico rig, that's what I caught that walleye on. They just inhaled it. Buddy of mine was at Big Creek and was throwing, I think he was throwing a wacky worm up on the silt dam and caught a, what was it, 22-inch walleye. They seem to like that worm.
You want to explain the Nico rig? It's just really a wacky.
So a wacky, everybody knows what a wacky rig is. It's the weighted hook. I use 2 O-rings on a wacky, cross them and then hook through it, right? So a Nico rig, you take the Cinco and you've got a nail weight you put on the head end of it. Just bury it clear in the head. You put 1 O-ring wherever you want in the middle. I usually go in the middle. And you have a Nico hook that you can either have a weed guard on it or not, depending where you're throwing it. And you hook it just through the O-ring with the weed guard. So your hook point is facing away from the nail weight. So as you're pulling it in, the nail weight is first and it drops real erratic. So it kind of, the worm drops real funny from one end. And that's the Nico, and it works really well. I like throwing that better than the wacky. That's what I prefer. It's just a little bit better presentation, I think. The spinnerbait, God, I just love throwing spinnerbait. It's fun to throw it all day. Didn't catch many at Sam Rayburn on spinnerbait. We caught a couple. That was it. We were about a week to 2 weeks early. The day before we left, the big ones were just moving in. I caught a 5. My son caught a 6. Buddy of mine caught a 5.5, and big ones were just coming in. The water temp was hitting 60 to 63. You could see a couple beds they were starting to make. So we were just a little early. The shaky head, I don't know if any of you guys, in that box, there's a worm. If you want to hold that worm up, yep, that's a shaky head. And it's kind of a Texas rigged finesse bait. I threw that exact one down there at Sam Rayburn and caught quite a few bass, bigger ones.
So this has a little barb?
So that's got the little wire screw.
Okay.
So you screw that worm into the head. And if you want, you can take that out and show everybody. And then you can rig that Texas style, but it's kind of a drop shot without the bottom weight, because you can cast that out and it stands up on end, and you can just sit there and shake it, and that old worm just kind of moves.
Does everybody know what?
How do you decide on the length of the worms? When I fish in Texas, I use really long worms. When I fish here, I never use anything more than 6 inch.
Right. So primarily summertime, I fish like a 10-inch worm. I mean, at Big Creek, we catch them deeper. Springtime, we stick with a lot of more. That's probably the biggest worm we threw the whole trip. That was a 6-inch. They just, like I said, we caught that 6-pounder on that little 5-inch. We call it a tickler worm. And they just primarily like a smaller bait. Well, I shouldn't say that, because typically in the spring, they like a smaller bait, but yet we pour a 6-inch swim bait, a big plastic swim bait. And I was throwing that 6-inch, I should have brought one, plastic bait, hand poured it, and I caught a 2-pound bass, and he absolutely inhaled it, just ate the whole thing. I thought I had a 5-pounder on, and he ate it. So, yeah, but the worms, primarily the bigger ones in the summer, work really well for me.
Any quality preference for worms?
I love that green pumpkin or the brown pumpkin. This is the brown pumpkin here. We had real good luck with that. I like the watermelon with the red flake. Texas is a watermelon golden purple flake. That was their go-to color. So I think the green pumpkin I like is my all-time favorite.
Have you tried this other one called sweet potato pie?
No,
Sweet potato.
Yeah.
I started using it around here.
it's orange.
It's a worm, and it's basically got green, yellow, and red kind of mixed in. And
Really?
at least in some areas where they've seen, he used red shad ad infinitum. They hit that sweet potato pretty well.
Okay, yeah. Huh. So I don't know if you could smell that. We impregnate that with garlic. It's pretty, but I mean, it's all through the bait. It's not just on the outside.
So that's the formula when you make the plastic, it goes in then?
Yep, it goes in hot in the pot.
Okay.
Yep. And then we inject it, so it's all the way through. I think it seemed to make a big difference. The fish, so we fished with some of the plastic last year down at Sam Rayburn, and we caught fish, but this year, these fish just ate it, and they run with it. So I think that scent really did help, you know.
That a liquid garlic?
It is, it's all liquid scent. Yeah.
I have a question on Russian Creek.
Yeah,
If you notice, you mentioned tournaments, almost excessive tournaments on that lake.
yeah.
You notice fish harder to catch. I mean, you've been down there for years, up there for years, but have you noticed harder and harder to catch fish?
Oh, yeah. Me and my son fished a tournament last fall down there, up there. And we caught one keeper all day. It was
The fish
terrible.
are there.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, they're there.
But they're pressured so much.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah, it was a tough day.
Trond, before you go on to that.
Yes.
Back to Green Valley.
Yeah.
Do you do any punching? You put, like
I
a.
haven't done a whole lot of that. That buddy of mine, Tim, he punches through that stuff, and
What is that?
it's a good, so you'll take a jig or a Texas rigged creature bait with a 3/4 or 1 ounce weight. That's super heavy, and you'll literally either pitch it or flip it up onto the mat or the weeds, the heavy weeds, and it'll punch through it, and they'll be laying underneath that. And he seems to have real good luck. I haven't done a whole lot of it. I've done it a little bit.
If you go to Toledo Bend, they do a lot of that down there.
Really? Yeah, yeah. When we were at Sam Rayburn, they've got this stuff called hay grass. And it's a heavier grass that grows out from the shore. And we saw a lot of guys punching through that.
Is there a retreat technique to that punching, or you just?
You punch straight down through it and you jig it. And when they hit it, you just crank them out.
If they don't bite, you just bang it back to them?
Yep, you just flip it right back up and punch through another hole, or that's pretty much all you do. Just kind of work your way down. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Wintertime, it's boring, so we end up pouring lots of baits and making jigs and chatterbaits, and it's just kind of fun. Yeah.
That plastisol that you use to
Yep.
pour those, is there different grades of that? Some is softer than others?
Yep. So we use a company called Dead On Plastics. They've got 3 different plastisols. They've got a floating, and they've got they call it a jerk bait, something, but it's like a softer, it's not, it sinks, but it's a softer plastisol. And then they've got a craw, which is made for punching, or, Texas rig, that's a lot more firm. Yeah. So they've got a pretty good variety of.
I heard that they add salt to it to make it softer too, some of those mixes. You ever heard that?
Could be, no, but yeah. Yeah, pretty much injecting the plastics is pretty addicting. It's, you got your colors and your glitter and your molds, and luckily a buddy of mine, this Tim, he's bought all the molds, because the molds are anywhere from, one mold is $100, and I think his biggest, his most expensive is $230 mold. And I think we've got 12 molds with different, it's crazy.
And you thought racing was.
This is still cheaper, trust me. That's how I can justify this. So my biggest bass to date is that is 8-pounder. She's on the wall. I was down at Lake Tahoe in Missouri. It's a little, I think it's a county lake down there. Huh? Yeah. I haven't been there in many, many years. I don't know if it's still that good.
So they say,
Yeah, okay. But yeah, that was a hell of a fish. That 6-pounder down at Lake Thunderhead, which is by Unionville, Missouri. It's a private lake. Tim, that buddy of mine, used to have a place down there. We'd go down and fish, just get spoiled. My wife's a big quilter. I had no clue. She made a quilt for me for Christmas, which she made it in the basement and I had no idea. It's like, really?
With all your catches, is that?
Yeah, she took all of the pictures of my fish. She sent them to a lady in Florida and she put them on cloth. And then she made a quilt. It was pretty cool. So that was awesome.
Everybody over there had this.
Yeah, I think so.
This year's pictures, that was my 5-pounder down there. We got on to, I actually bribed Chuck into borrowing his Livescope, and we went down to the docks and they have brush piles, and we were catching huge crappies. I mean, it was like a video game. You just sit there and watch them come up out of the brush, and we just had a blast. We caught, I bet we caught 150 crappies, and they were all nice. And down there, they have to be 10-inch minimum to keep, which we didn't know that till this year. So luckily, we just kept the bigger one.
How did you like the Livescope? Did you use it for bass fishing?
So I did. I took it out on the boat. So my buddy Tim's got Active Target, which is Lowrance, on his trolling motor. And I've fished with him with it. And, he's got it mounted on his trolling motor. And like that, you just flip it out and you'd see a fish. You'd see your bait go down, and you have to fine tune it where your lure is. And you can just watch them come up and eat it. Worked wonderful. But when I took Chuck's, I had the pole on the side, which worked good. But when I went to cast, it's such a narrow beam. I had to fiddle with trying to find where my lure was. I mean, we saw the fish out there, but I couldn't, I had a hell of a time finding my lure. And it was real hard to do this and do this.
They spend more time watching the screen than fishing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So me personally, for bass fishing on the trolling motor, to where you can just sit there and move it. Huh?
Using your foot pedal?
Yeah, works wonderful. You can just really zoom right in, or, pinpoint where you're at. But for the docks, my God, phenomenal. One guy that hadn't used it, he sat there for half an hour holding the pole, and doing play-by-play, and it was like a little kid. He's like, here he comes, get ready. It was just fun to watch. That's it.
How was the fishing pressure down at Sam Rayburn?
So,
Competition for lots of boats.
There is tournaments down there every weekend. It's, 5 years ago, it got, labeled as, a giant bass reservoir. And ever since then, it's just been packed. But it's 118,000 square acres. So I mean, one bay that we were in, you could run wide open for 5 minutes and not get to the back of it, you know, and that's just one little bay. It's crazy. But when the wind got rolling, it got scary. It was a college tournament down there the weekend before we got there. Two of the college guys' boats capsized. Nobody got hurt, but yeah, it gets pretty scary.
Any questions out there in Zoom land? Neil,
Yeah,
you have any questions, Neil Geppinger?
no, I haven't seen any saltwater bass.
Okay. Have you been fishing in Florida?
No, I wish I had. I've talked to some fellas out here on the beach that have had real good luck in the last week. But I just haven't had time to do it. I'm sorry, Lee.
Joe Malik in Illinois.